What makes a good horror game? That is a question I often find myself asking. Is it the uncanny feeling we get from exploring a dead world? The thrill of being startled by a terrifying monster? Or perhaps the discovery of a dark secret hidden beneath a story?
How many times you watched that thing? Guess you really miss her.
There's an exhaustive list of titles that offer these kind of experiences. But despite this vast spectrum of terror, only a limited number manage to cement themselves in our minds. For me, that is what makes a good horror game. Something that sticks with you, an experience that can prey on your thoughts long after you've rolled the credits. I believe Darkwood is one of those games. Developed by a Polish indie studio named Acid Wizard, Darkwood is a game that fundamentally understands how to get under the player's skin. The prologue section alone wastes no time in establishing a deeply disturbing tone, which acts as a microcosm for the entire game's themes. You take control of a doctor who's overcome with guilt, feeling responsible for being unable to remedy the nearby townspeople of an incurable affliction, a disease born from a plague that has devastated the area. After leaving the safety of the doctor's house, you're greeted by his canine companion lying on the floor, injured and distressed. Your character notes that you should end their suffering. Conveniently, just a few steps away lies an axe. There's a sudden, palpable sense of hesitation as you're confronted by the game's first uncomfortable decision. Do you continue forward, leaving the animal to a slow and agonizing demise, or go back to end their prolonged suffering? Darkwood doesn't present this choice with any moral judgment, leaving it yours to wrestle with alone as you try to consider which outcome would carry the least weight on your psyche. The first descent into Darkwood's unsettling world doesn't offer any reprieve from this feeling. Instead, the developers reinforce your discomfort by setting expectations for the experience ahead. After a brief walk, you discover an unconscious stranger bleeding into the grass. But rather than administering medical attention, the doctor proceeds to steal a key from their possession, take them back to his house, and torture them for information on how to escape these accursed lands. This confirms two important narrative elements of the game. First, that Darkwood's world isn't one of good versus evil, but rather the nuanced space residing in between, where survival is depicted as a morally questionable, sanity-defying, and brutal endeavor. The other, simpler, but equally disturbing revelation is that everyone you encounter in this forest is trapped, confined to the murky abyss like bugs tangled in a spider's web. The next moment effectively transitions you into the open map, with you unexpectedly assuming control of the injured man, who is Darkwood's actual protagonist. The burden of his survival is now yours to carry. Your escape attempt is then disrupted after killing a nearby prisoner in self-defense, as a swarm of malignant, shadowy entities attack and engulf the screen. Days later, you awaken in Dry Meadow, cast out of the prologue's linear frying pan and into the open fires of Chapter 1's more expansive map. One of the statements offered by the developers is that Darkwood doesn't hold your hand. Venturing outside the hideout's fragile safety for the first time definitely conveyed this feeling. There's a small marker on the map given to indicate the location of an underground passage, but the door inside can only be unlocked by a key. The same key the Doctor stole from the protagonist. So, whilst the game does communicate an objective to recover this item, you are left with the responsibility of figuring out how. This lack of a robust tutorial is intentional, as it not only encourages the player to search through this haunting world, but to also learn how to survive it. And with so much of Darkwood's setting being shrouded in mystery, every footstep becomes underpinned by the fear of the unknown. A core component of the game's distinctive brand of horror, and something that makes exploration feel nerve-wracking. Despite this fear, you must spend the next few hours of game time scouring the immediate vicinity for resources. You'll stumble upon points of interest that contain useful materials to bring back to the hideout. These items allow you to fortify your base of operations by barricading windows, placing bear traps on the ground, and refilling the generator with precious gasoline to power the lights. All of this is in preparation for the most prominent danger in the game: the horrors that arrive after dark. By no later than 8 PM, you must return to your sanctuary, a cobbled-together fortress that acts as a double-edged sword. The oven inside produces a protective gas that expels a roaming shadow that would otherwise consume you. But this also forces you into a confined space. This isolation, combined with excellent sound design and the game's cone of vision presentation, makes waiting out the night a dread-inducing affair. You'll witness strange paranormal occurrences, such as doors creaking open seemingly by themselves, making you nervously question whether someone is hiding just outside your narrow view. Through the barricaded windows, you'll identify splintered silhouettes, causing you to grip your weapon in anticipation for whatever eldritch horror is about to break through. Darkwood's nocturnal sequences connote the same unease as the folklore surrounding nighttime in the Appalachian Mountains. An example of horror that feels incredibly unnerving, all without having to rely on a single jump scare to frighten the player. While so much of this terror occurs dynamically, there are a handful of scripted events sprinkled throughout. For example, on the second night, the quiet tension is disturbed by a sudden knock on the door. After mustering enough courage to open it, you'll find a wedding invitation ominously left on the ground. As a new day dawns, you head towards the romantic festivities. Upon arrival, you're greeted by a trail of floral confetti directing you through a maze. But it's not long before you realize this welcoming entranceway is a facade. As you step into a picnic courtyard and find the bride creepily dancing alone, as though she's trapped within a trance. After skulking around the back of the building, you climb through an open window. There you discover the groom bashing his head against the end of a table, keeping each painful pound in rhythm to the eerie music. As you get closer, he mutters the words, "We've been waiting for you." Behind him is a gloomy forest filled with ghostly brides inviting you to dance with them. When returning to the main room, this creepy atmospheric surrealism turns into a very tangible danger. Scripted moments such as these allow Darkwood to offer disturbing gameplay that's varied, by achieving a balance between frightening encounters that feel organic alongside others that are carefully handcrafted. Balancing mechanics is something Acid Wizard does exceptionally well. Almost everything you do in the game centers around the concept of risk versus reward. Do you craft a bear trap to survive the night, or save the scrap metal to repair your weapon for the next day? Do you use up your pistol's ammunition to fight off a deadly foe, or try to melee attack them in case something worse lurks further up the path? Even Darkwood's leveling system echoes this philosophy. As you harvest odd-looking mushrooms and meat from downed enemies, you can use the Hideout's oven to distill it into an injectable essence. This essence, the same substance the doctor injected you with in the prologue, grants you a perk at the cost of a drawback. For example, you might decide to increase your total vitality, but now healing items are less effective. This design approach permeates across the game, granting you greater agency, which in turn creates pressure to make the best decisions possible. It elevates the suspense of the moment-to-moment gameplay by making every action have a potentially positive or negative effect on your chances of survival. Every milestone essence upgrade also has another side effect, one that hints at Darkwood's closest kept secret. When reaching the next tier of perks, you'll fall unconscious and enter a surreal, David Lynch-style dream state. One in particular has you awaken in a murky clearing and follow a trail of shiny stones on the ground. At one point, you find a lamp. Switching it on reveals a mass of malnourished, incapacitated bodies surrounding you. In this moment, it feels like the dream is transitioning into a nightmare, or perhaps a tear behind a frightening illusion. After collecting the shiny stones, you find a comfy-looking bed and use it, an action that strangely transitions you back to your hideout. This sequence, and others like it, inject an element of surrealism into Darkwood's horror tapestry, similar to what can be found in the acclaimed Silent Hill series.
You were having a bad dream.
Was I?
Before you leave Dry Meadow, you're introduced to two key characters in Darkwood's story. The first is the man who rescued you from the doctor's house, simply named the Trader. After every night survived, you gain currency with the Trader, which is referred to as reputation. He will then conveniently visit your hideout to barter this and other useful items. It's a crucial service that highlights how, even in this hellscape, a twisted sense of commerce persists. There's also some strange abnormalities belonging to this character's design, something we'll discuss in greater detail later on in the video. The second character you meet is the philanthropic Wolfman, a snarling and gruff individual who, much like the majority of Darkwood's cast, has a distinctive feature latched onto their appearance, an uncanny element intertwined with nature and supported by a tragic or horrifying backstory. The overarching theming and design of Darkwood's characters works in tandem to the desaturated color palette and overgrown vegetation of the game world, creating a setting that possesses visual continuity between the environment and its inhabitants. It's as though everyone and everything has been torn from the pages of a horrifying dark fairy tale. The journey ahead takes you to Silent Forest, the second of 4 maps belonging to Darkwood. Each one gets progressively more challenging and has its own hideout to defend at night. From a gameplay perspective, you're encouraged to progress through each zone to acquire better equipment and scavenge more items. As unlike other survival games, resources in this world are finite. Staying in Dry Meadow for too long would have you burning through the landscape's available materials. But by contrast, rushing to Silent Forest too early could leave you unprepared for its stronger adversaries. Therefore, transitioning between these hideouts needs to be a strategically planned decision. This juxtaposition between remaining patient while having time constraints prevents Darkwood's pacing from ever feeling static, turning even something as rudimentary as daytime into another resource that must be managed effectively, as you try to avoid aimless wandering as much as possible by setting objectives for the day ahead. Fortunately for you, there is a character who could help make the transition to your new home a lot easier. When arriving at the Silent Forest's hideout, you find a bike bell in the workshop. Attached to it is a note that says, "Liquor tasting and transport service. Fast and efficient. Call now." Ringing this bell summons an individual called the Bike Man, who kindly offers to transport your collected materials from Dry Meadow to the new hideout. This laborious task is offered in exchange for just a single bottle of alcohol, a reasonable trade that would be foolish to ignore, and also another example of how commerce has persisted in this twisted world. After settling into your new hideout and fortifying its surroundings, you must survive the first night in Silent Forest. This 12-hour window gives you a horrifying glimpse into the heightened danger posed by this next section of the map. As a new day dawns, you try to get your bearings by surveying the immediate area. Often when I'm struggling to decide which direction to pick in a game, it's not long before I consult an online wiki or a Steam community post for assistance. But in Darkwood, the developers employ a safeguard to mitigate over-reliance on external help. While content in the game is handcrafted, its placement within each zone is randomly scattered upon every new playthrough. This forces you to explore the map to discover each location, resulting in an experience that feels more lonely and isolating, as though you're truly cut off from the outside world. There are, however, plenty of non-hostile residents in the forest to keep you company, one of whom is Piotrek. After dealing with a nearby beast at his scrapyard, you're able to converse with this eccentric individual. During the exchange, you can gift him various vehicle parts scavenged from abandoned tractors. What Piotrek wants to do with them is not left open to interpretation. One of the items found in the scrapyard is an old photograph of Yuri Gagarin, a Soviet cosmonaut who, in 1961, became the first person to journey to outer space. You can then find a colourful blueprint detailing Piotrek's desire to build a rocket ship. It's an ambitious plan, one that highlights the character's delusional state of mind. His desperate plan to build a rocket is an act of defiance against a reality he can't accept. Piotrek embodies the sheer will to escape the forest, even if it's based on a futile fantasy, with the ramifications of assisting his delusion being revealed later on. Reaching the Wolfman's camp in Silent Forest earns you his trust. The wolf then presents you with an assignment that reiterates the morally questionable nature of survival in Darkwood. He asks you to obtain a key from someone called the Chicken Lady, who lives in the nearby village. In exchange, Wolfman will offer information on how to escape the forest. Whilst it's definitely a tempting proposition, you can't shake the feeling that the full story hasn't been told, suspecting an ulterior motive to Wolfman, who appears to be motivated solely by his own dark agenda. But at this moment in time, you're left with no current alternative. This forces you into forming a transactional relationship with the character, one that isn't built on trust, but instead a mutual self-interest. This character then continues to reinforce this theme by offering a side objective, requesting you also visit a nearby location called the Pig Shed and get rid of the whimpering. This task is incentivized by the promise of a reward for your efforts. But first, let's focus on the first assignment given to the protagonist. Entering the village serves as a clear representation of the forest's hardships, with a wealth of contextual information presented through the environmental design and placement of NPC interactions. You discover derelict-looking buildings that hide suffering villagers. They appear to be in the late stages of the disease that's plaguing the land. An angry individual bashes at the nearby window of the mayor's house, demanding more food as a famine starves the populace. The nearby crematorium reveals the extent of this dire situation, as 2 bread ovens have been repurposed to burn a number of corpses, leaving their remains charred on the ground. A settler sitting at a campfire mutters remarks about a doctor who abandoned them. Inside its embers is a scorched medical bag, the same bag that can be found at the doctor's house during the prologue, giving way to the possibility that the shadowy figures you hallucinated were actually the residents of this downtrodden village, storming into the building enraged at what little assistance the doctor was able to provide against their affliction. There are also references to the aforementioned pig shed and an animal that resides there called the sow. This overgrown mutated pig's offspring had, up until recently, provided the townsfolk with their primary source of food. All of these harrowing aspects connote a sense that the village's survival hangs in a delicate balance, with even the smallest change potentially having a detrimental effect, positioning the player as an unforeseen variable, one who possesses an unprecedented amount of influence over the fate of the village. Shortly after speaking with the Chicken Lady, you meet the musician, who asks you to find the key to the old woman's locked bedroom. This is the very same key that Wolfman has already tasked you with bringing to him. The musician's request therefore presents the player with a moral dilemma. Do you give the key to the Wolfman to get information that could help you escape the forest? Or do you give it to the musician, who simply wants to serenade the woman he calls the Pretty Lady? It's a classic choice between selfish gain and a selfless act, one that again forces the player to consider their own moral compass, by questioning whether it's better to serve your own needs or to help someone else, even if it comes at a cost. In the interest of keeping this video relatively condensed, I'm going to focus on following the Wolfman path. This includes completing the second task he assigned to the player. Whilst giving the key to Wolfman changes the course of plot elements later on, the act of killing the sow has an immediate and devastating effect on the village. When returning the following day, you discover that the grief-stricken townsfolk have brought the remains of the creature into the centre of the settlement, gathering around its festering corpse, praying for the sow's resurrection. Amongst their anguish is also a growing hatred towards the protagonist, even going so far as to set a trap beneath the mayor's house, releasing an imprisoned red chomper as an attempt to seek revenge for the pig's death. This immediate reflection of the player's agency demonstrates the tangible consequences your actions have in Darkwood, with the sow's death even causing the villagers to relocate and appear in the final map, presenting another moral dilemma as they desperately search for a new food source and consider eating a nearby mushroom-infested granny. But before you can reach this location and decide the fate of this once thriving community, you head towards the old woods in search of the doctor from the prologue. The entrance to this new area alone sets an expectation for the danger it poses. As you cross the bridge, a twitching corpse blocks your path. You strike it, only to discover it was a dormant chomper who is now angered by your presence. This enemy type populates the old woods and provides some of the most challenging encounters in the game. I mentioned earlier that Darkwood's world design segregates difficulty into distinctive zones, but it was upon entering this region that I began to really appreciate this. Many horror games struggle to maintain their fear factor over time, as the repetition of encounters can cause desensitization. But by saving its more intense enemies, or in this case, a greater number of them, Darkwood keeps the experience feeling unpredictable, injecting new terrors into the game as you progress. This difficulty, of course, extends to nightfall. The Old Woods hideout is much larger than the previous two, with multiple rooms and narrow corridors. This severely restricts your visibility, as you can't see past the maze of walls. It also makes it easier for danger to get up close and attack you unexpectedly. The exterior wall is also damaged beyond repair, providing easy access points for anything lurking in the darkness outside. Managing the Old Woods hideout is therefore much more difficult, requiring far more resources to properly barricade. You'll need to choose carefully which room to defend and strategically place bear traps on any unprotected areas. But this will only protect you for so long. When numerous chompers storm the building, the solution is often to just try and buy enough time until sunrise. As with Dry Meadow and Silent Forest, progression through the old woods requires you to venture out and explore, discovering new locations, leveling up your essence, and experiencing more lucid dreams. Dreams that, much like each new region, are starting to feel increasingly more dangerous. Eventually, the player will stumble upon a barn that's overrun by a pack of stray dogs. After carving a path through this deadly deterrent, you discover a hidden hideout belonging to the Wolfman, who greets you with an unprecedented level of excitement. It's clear your prior actions have favorably changed this character's disposition towards you, as he relishes in glee at the downfall of the village, mocking its inhabitants' desperate pleas for the sow's resurrection. When entering the room behind him, you also discover the horrifying truth behind Wolfman's desire for the pretty lady's room key. The implication is clear. Your choices led directly to this. Her corpse, ravaged and soaked in blood, is the price of your survival. With the Wolfman's self-interest now satiated, it's finally time for the player to be rewarded for pursuing this more questionable story path. He offers to take you to the doctor's house in search of clues to their whereabouts. This is the same building from the Prologue, although its state has worsened since the attack. Here you solve a floor puzzle and open a previously hidden safe. Inside is a code and a map marker that indicates the doctor's location at a nearby train wreckage. But before you leave, you can bestow a merciful end to an abandoned patient cowering in the nearby medical facility. This individual is in the terrifying process of transforming into a chomper. Beckoning in pain, they describe their head feeling as though it's about to explode. After collecting the key off their corpse, you unlock a nearby bathroom and loot an axe from another body. This weapon deals the highest melee damage in Darkwood, and will be desperately needed to survive the horrors that await the player in the game's final map. After opening the train wreckage doors, you find the man you've spent hours searching for. The key he stole is finally in reach, yet your urgency and thirst for revenge are unexpectedly halted. Despite this character's brutal depiction in the prologue, the developers use this moment to reframe him from a more sympathetic angle. He looks weary, distressed, and is begging for mercy, referencing his little girl's desperate cries somewhere in the distance. His priority is clearly to escape the forest and answer her call, a pursuit that is similar to the player's desperate search for freedom. It's also important to reiterate how different this moment can be depending on your prior actions, with the path we've taken providing the player with the option to invite the Doctor to join you at the underground passage, creating a mutually beneficial scenario that avoids bloodshed, as he possesses the key and we know the location of the door it unlocks. Whilst this moment marks a conclusion to the narrative thread of the protagonist's journey in Chapter 1, there is another encounter in the underground passage that echoes a greater, more disturbing revelation to the world of Darkwood. Upon asking the Doctor to unlock the mysterious door, you traverse through its shadowed, narrow passages and emerge at a blocked intersection. A voice suddenly calls out from the darkness. It's a man, tangled in a web of roots. During a confused and disoriented exchange, a colorless liquid oozes from the man's head as he pulls out a soft item that resembles the shape of a bullet. Around the corner lies a corpse that shares the same gunshot wound. You can also find a cross on both the tangled man and this nearby corpse. However, the one found on the corpse is real and the other is an imitation, a replica that was created after the original item came into contact with this strange, colourless liquid. We can also see an instance of this strange occurrence back in the Old Woods. If the player fully explores this section of the map, they can discover a hunter's lodge nestled amongst the trees. Inside, 3 key findings reveal a harrowing origin story. A photo of a wolf, an empty trophy display where its head was mounted, and the corpse of the hunter who pulled the trigger, now surrounded by roots emerging from the ground. By connecting the dots, we can learn that the hunter's body came into contact with both the colourless liquid and the wolf's head display, producing a disturbed replica of both in the form of the Wolfman. A revelation that encapsulates the core pillars of Darkwood's distinctive horror, where the creature isn't just a monster, but a corrupted, merged memory of both man and animal, carrying an irony and consequence to the former hunter's story, as through the act of killing and mounting his prey, he inadvertently set in motion the events that led to his own monstrous fusion. Learning this begins to reshape how the player perceives the journey home. We're no longer just wondering how to escape the forest, but also beginning to ask what exactly it is that we're trying to escape from. Once you emerge from the underground passage, you arrive at the swamp. This is the setting of Darkwood's second chapter, and one that acts as the culmination of everything that came before it. In this more otherworldly and volatile landscape, the line between nightmares and reality has dissolved completely. It's here that Darkwood fully embraces its Lovecraftian inspirations, consistently toying with the player's expectations and heightening the fear of the unknown. From the strange eyes glaring at you from the ground, to the eldritch horrors that stalk the deep, murky waters. You're encouraged to tread carefully and be prepared for anything. Having survived the first night in your new hideout, ending the ordeal with a struggle against a human centipede, the protagonist seeks out the familiar comfort of the trader. However, you instead discover an unsettling substitution. A trio of merchants referred to only as the Free. The Free assume the role of the trader from the previous chapter, sharing their own connection to the swamp in the form of reverence towards a nearby talking tree. The suggestion being that one of the many faces nestled within this tree is a replicant of their father. After restocking on supplies, you begin to step out of your hideout, but are stopped in your tracks by a corpse lying on the ground. Whilst the protagonist doesn't appear to recognize the body, the player likely will. It's the trader. The word liar is etched into his helmet. The mysterious circumstance surrounding this character's death is not something that's ever given a full explanation, only a quiet, understated moment of reflection, leaving it up to the player to speculate what happened. Two popular online theories allude to the possibility that the trader was killed by either the Free or the protagonist himself. I think it's more likely to be the latter, as the Free are not depicted as violent individuals, whereas the protagonist's increasingly lucid state of mind could be responsible for this violent act. Perhaps in the confusion or from frustration towards the trader, after he begged the protagonist to not take the way home, but instead to stay with him in the Old Woods. It's also entirely possible the trader was simply defeated by one of the many cosmic horrors lurking in the swamp, highlighting the elevated danger this region possesses. Either way, it's a sad end to one of the few characters the player has been able to call a friend. Searching the trader's body reveals 2 items he was carrying: a replica of the protagonist's key and their notebook. How strange. When exploring the swamp, you'll encounter the Doctor, who is deteriorating at an alarming speed, as the disease has begun to ravage both his body and mind. When speaking to him, he harbors aggression and disdain towards the protagonist, noting that you are an outsider, someone that has always watched everyone else's struggles from afar. A subtle hint towards your character's origins, but also an example of how the plague is warping the Doctor's personality in tandem with his appearance, a state that will only worsen with time. By showing the gradual decline of the Doctor, Darkwood highlights the extraordinary nature of the game's plague, as this is a man with a medical background, and therefore an understanding of the physical and neurological symptoms that are typically associated with diseases and infections. Yet here he lacks any awareness of what's even happening to him, as though the disease has manipulated him completely, altering his own sense of self in the process. But perhaps the most disturbing embodiment of this plague can be found in the corner of the map, an unassuming little cottage which hides a big secret. An oversized snail that possesses horrifying features, with fragments of bone emerging from their face and human eyes uncomfortably resting at the end of their stalks. Thankfully for the player, they do not appear to be hostile, although this naturally raises questions towards the creature's backstory. After prying a key from a hand protruding from their body, the player can unlock a pathway and clear a nearby blockage. In return, the snail thanks the player for their efforts and asks you to return tomorrow. Upon returning, you discover the cottage is now empty, giving way to a basement underneath. Here you find a journal which offers some contextual information. Alongside noting concerns over spotting strange-looking people nearby and providing a map marker for a radio tower, there's a harrowing reference towards the author's consumption of snails. This was to fend off their growing starvation, but it seems this desperate attempt to survive was in vain, as the author's corpse can be found around the corner. Connecting the dots, you learn the snail was a replica, a grotesque combination of the withering corpse, the colourless goo, and the snails inside their stomach. I mentioned in the introduction that a good horror game is one that sticks with you. It's safe to say that this creature's design and the unsettling backstory surrounding it is one of those moments from Darkwood that will always haunt me. On the way back to the hideout, you pass through a junkyard. At its epicenter is a wreckage, a crashed rocket ship, the same one you helped Piotrek build back in Silent Forest. The aspiring cosmonaut's body now lays still in the wake of the destruction, an unfortunate fate at the hands of his own fantasy, a delusion driven solely by his rejection of the frightening reality of his situation, and the desire to escape the ever-tightening grip of the forest. When reaching the hideout, you notice a pathway of dirt has been trodden through the building. It leads to a locked door that you cannot open. As night begins to fall, you remain conscious that something may be lurking inside your compound's walls. After a few in-game hours, the door suddenly creaks open. You clutch your axe and slowly enter the dark room, your narrow cone of vision fighting the suffocating darkness, only to discover a figure hiding within, the musician. But he's no longer the boy you once knew. Just like the Doctor, his appearance has also dramatically worsened. The mask covering his face barely fits and his limbs have abnormally lengthened. The character now resembles an uncomfortably overgrown man. The musician explains that he followed the villagers' migration to the swamp. They have entered this region in search of a new food source, following the death of the sow. However, the disgust they feel towards him has only festered as his body grew. The musician now seeks refuge in your hideout and gives the player the location of the villagers, who are residing in a makeshift camp at a nearby quarry. Their inclusion in this chapter poses another moral dilemma, as the remaining population plan to eat a mushroom-infested granny to satiate their hunger, and the player has once again been given agency to shape the outcome of the situation, with one of the options allowing you to bring an end to the once thriving community. And just like before, there is an incentive in return, an oxygen tank which will assist your journey, helping you navigate one of the ways you can reach home. In this route, you venture through the village and end up burning the talking tree to pass through the forest boundary and escape. But this is not the way we're going to take. Instead, we're going to head towards the radio tower and enter what is referred to as the final dream scene, a surreal nightmare that, if survived, allows you to find the road home, alongside some information that will help you piece together the secrets of the protagonist's backstory. Shortly after arriving at the radio tower, you're met with a dangerous obstruction. A flock of sleeping banshee babies who are ready to awaken at the slightest noise. When carefully treading around these slumbering horrors, you find the corpse of the snail. On their journey away from the cottage, the creature got trapped by the radio tower's debris. The banshee babies then pecked at his body until he met an unfortunate and slow demise. Upon entering the radio tower, you find the control panel completely infested with mushrooms. As you hack away at the fungus, it releases a cloud of spores that causes the protagonist to pass out. You then awaken in a dark cavern, following a trail of shiny stones that's eerily similar to the one you encountered in the very first dream. Then, in this final dream scene, you re-experience the events of the Doctor's house in the prologue. But this time, you finally manage to escape the chomper attack and run through the frightening jaws of a face etched into the cavern wall, breaking free from the claustrophobic illusion. Ascending up the ladder, you're greeted by the embrace of warm, fresh air, and begin to investigate the area. You find research notes detailing the anomaly of the colourless goo, confirming that it possesses shape-shifting properties and resides within the roots of the many trees. This document was written by your own hand. You then stumble upon a scarecrow wearing a hazmat suit and 3 trees, 2 of which have bodies strung up against them. Beneath the 3rd empty tree lies a blood-stained rope with pieces of a hazmat suit attached to it. Heading further east, you discover a camp where testing was being conducted with electrodes attached to various trees. You find a jar containing the colourless goo labelled 21, the same number that appeared on your key and the door to the underground passage. Connecting the dots, you learn that the protagonist was once a researcher, sent to the forest with a small group to investigate the growing disturbance created by the plague, using the underground passage as a means of safe entry. But after presumably being attacked by savages, you were strung up against a tree. Whilst the other two researchers succumbed to their injuries, you managed to break free and then traded clothes with a nearby scarecrow. From the blood-stained rope left on the ground, the trader was born. Your DNA and the hazmat material combined with the colourless goo emanating from the nearby tree. This is reinforced by the strange descriptions given after you first met the trader, with your character noting that the man was roughly the same height as you, and all you could see was the reflection from his mask. But this wasn't a reflection. It was a replica of your own face staring back at you. Despite escaping the restraints tying you to the tree, you were still hurt, making it as far as the old woods before collapsing and being discovered by the doctor. During your brief stay at the doctor's house, he injected you with the essence, the same essence you have been injecting yourself with throughout the game, corrupting you with fever dreams and terrifying hallucinations. As you continue past the research camp, you finally walk along the road home. At last, you put some much-needed distance between you and the horrors of the forest. With each passing step, you feel a sense of ease begin to wash over you. Walking past the remains of the many trapped souls who weren't so fortunate, you're reminded of how lucky you are to have survived. After what feels like an eternity, you emerge into an open clearing, a vast meadow that ends with the welcome sight of tall, urban structures. Friendly, familiar faces greet you as you pass by, and you begin to head towards your apartment. Once inside, your canine companion lovingly welcomes you, and you warm up a hearty soup on the stove, and then finally climb into bed. The weight of your feet at last laid to rest. Your head touches your pillow, and as you begin to drift away into a well-deserved slumber, you begin to contemplate the journey you've been on. Every hardship, every interaction, every night survived. Finally, the nightmares are over. A sense of bliss begins to wash over you, a powerful yet peaceful sensation that encourages you to surrender to the moment. A feeling that feels almost alien after so many days of existential dread, but one you embrace altogether. But then, there's a whisper of doubt. What if this feeling, this peace, this bliss, is a lie? What if you aren't lying in your bed, but instead somewhere else, seduced by an all-too-perfect illusion? When you entered the building, you headed upstairs towards your apartment. But if you'd walked down into the basement, you'd have begun to find a few details that imply something is amiss, such as hearing a voice on a radio which commands you to go to sleep. Throughout the game, various radios have been used to relay a message, a call from an unknown origin. Heading back upstairs, you decide to peek into a neighbor's apartment, only to see a baby lying on the ground. Entering your home, you notice something growing out of the floorboards. As you begin to peel the panels back, you uncover a sprawl of growing, interconnecting roots underneath, and quickly realize this isn't your home. You have been manipulated by a comforting illusion. You didn't take the road home, but instead, the road into the heart of the forest. As you awaken into this nightmarish reality, you find yourself surrounded by emaciated bodies, all of them trapped within a lucid and powerful bliss, unaware they have succumbed to a lie. You find a man with something clutched tightly in his hands. This is Masick, one of your former research colleagues. In the Old Woods hideout, you can find a note that details both his disappearance and that he took a flamethrower with him, a weapon you will now pry from his frail body. Walking further into this hellscape reveals the source of the horror: the colorless goo, the growing trees, the replicated people, and the plague, all originated from this white, oozing, otherworldly entity called the Being. As you stare into its misty void, you contemplate the two options that lay in front of you. Do you accept the false reality the Being is feeding you, or reject it? The thought passes fleetingly. As you instinctively ignite the flamethrower and proceed to burn everything you see. No longer concerned with self-preservation, but just wanting to finally put an end to this nightmare. Eventually, the piles of burning bodies surround you, desperately trying to protect the eldritch horror they now worship. But it's too late. The entire forest is ignited, and you've reached the true ending of Darkwood. Creating a narrative twist like this, especially in a horror game, is no easy endeavor. A trail of breadcrumbs hinting towards the truth needs to be sprinkled carefully throughout. Too heavy a hand would have had the player guessing the real ending. But for me at least, Darkwood managed to create a twist that left a lasting impression. It's not a happy ending, but an honest one. A demise that speaks to the horror of the forest, and the impossible task of surviving the clutches of the Being whilst maintaining consciousness. With the only way to escape this spider is to cut away its web entirely, dooming all that were attached to it, but containing the spread of the danger it posed. There's a lot to love about this game. The pixel art style graphics are stunning and allow your imagination to fill in the blanks. The game's sound design is exceptional, with some of the most frightening moments being created through audio cues alone. And I have to commend the ambiguity and nuance of the writing, which ties everything together, culminating into what I believe is one of the most disturbing indie games ever made. But what are your thoughts on Darkwood, and are you excited for the sequel? Let me know in the comments, as I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, leaving a like and subscribing would also be greatly appreciated, as it will continue to fuel the creation of more content like this. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.